Cop smirks at black woman defendant in court. Then she pulls out her DOJ badge. Have you ever witnessed a moment in a courtroom where power dynamics suddenly flip in the most dramatic way possible? Picture this. A seasoned police officer, confident in his authority, smirks at a young black woman standing as a defendant. Tension ripples through the room, and everyone braces for the usual story, where the vulnerable fall prey to the system. But in a single heartbeat, the courtroom hushes. She reaches into her purse, pulls out a polished badge from the Department of Justice, and the balance of power changes forever. In that moment, lines blur, secrets unravel, and the real pursuit of justice begins. Talia Morgan stood before the towering exterior of the Fulton County Courthouse in downtown Atlanta, heart thudding in her chest. The red brick building, topped by an antiquated copper dome, seemed to loom over her, as though warning her of the battle she was about to face. Despite the swirl of emotions inside her, nervousness, apprehension, and a trace of indignation, she kept her posture poised, her back straight and her expression resolute. The gentle Georgia breeze rustled the leaves of the magnolia trees lining the street, offering her a semblance of calm in a moment rife with tension. At 29, Talia had devoted her entire adult life to two things: law enforcement and seeking the truth. From the outside, however, she appeared like any other young black woman stepping into court under the weight of allegations. And that was precisely the point. Her dark hair was styled in a neat, low bun, and she wore a sleek navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, professional attire that didn't scream, "I work for the Department of Justice." It was intentional camouflage for what she was really about to do. Entering the courthouse, she navigated the corridor that led toward courtroom number 6. There was a soft hush in the main hallway, punctuated only by the squeaks of shoes on the polished floor, and hushed conversations between lawyers and their clients. Talia's gaze drifted across the broad marble expanse to a bulletin board featuring upcoming cases. In bold letters, she saw it. State of Georgia versus Talia Morgan. That official heading, that black and white list of defendants, betrayed nothing of the intricacies swirling beneath the surface. The docket gave no clue about the bombshell that was waiting to drop. As she took a seat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, Talia let her eyes linger on the swirling designs etched into the tall double doors. She recalled every reason she'd come here, on the surface as a defendant, but in reality, as someone determined to expose the truth. The allegation she faced had been arranged specifically to bring her into this courthouse without attracting suspicion. Even the judge was unaware of the larger plan. In fact, very few people knew by design. This operation demanded the utmost secrecy. She recognized Officer Brad Mulligan right away as he strode down the hall, his posture reeking of arrogance. His blonde hair was cropped close, and he wore a crisp uniform that bore the insignia of the Atlanta Police Department. He was a tall man, someone who commanded attention simply by walking into a room. Yet it was the smug set of his lips and the faint smirk flickering on his face that rattled Talia the most. He arrived with his partner, a more subdued figure named Officer Miguel Reyes, whose eyes darted around with a hint of nervousness. Officer Mulligan made no attempt to hide his contempt as he spotted Talia waiting outside the courtroom. In that moment, Talia understood that she was meant to feel small, to feel powerless. If Mulligan's side of the story prevailed, she was just another black woman who'd stepped out of line. But unknown to him, the scripts were about to be flipped. To understand how Talia found herself in a defendant's seat, one had to go back several weeks to a clandestine meeting in Washington, D.C. Inside the Robert F. Kennedy Department of Justice building, a real imposing structure with carved columns and large black doors, Talia had sat in a secure briefing room. The overhead lighting was stark, and the room's minimal decor offered no distractions. The quiet hum of the HVAC system provided the only background noise. Seated around the table with her were two men of enormous influence: Deputy Attorney General Marcus Whitfield and her direct supervisor, Special Agent in Charge Regina Pierce. Both were high-ranking officials within the Department of Justice. Marcus, with his salt-and-pepper hair and solemn demeanor, leaned forward, pinning Talia with a stare that conveyed both urgency and trust. Regina, younger but no less formidable, had a commanding presence that made lesser agents shrink. "Talia," Regina said quietly, tapping a manila folder on the polished table. "We've had corruption cases in Georgia that have gone nowhere for years. Evidence is destroyed or lost. Witnesses suddenly recant, it never sticks. This time we need a different approach." Marcus cleared his throat. "We believe the corruption runs deep. We suspect involvement from multiple players in law enforcement and legal circles. It's possible that some of the local judiciary are compromised as well. Your record is exemplary, and your infiltration skills are unmatched. We want you to go undercover as a defendant in a small but conspicuous case, something that Officer Mulligan can't resist exploiting." Talia's heartbeat quickened. She'd done undercover work before, but never in a courtroom setting. The risk was astronomical. "So I'm basically going to let them arrest me," she said, her tone carefully measured, "to gather intel and possibly identify co-conspirators from the inside." Marcus nodded. "We have a cover story. Mulligan has ties to certain individuals we've been monitoring. If he thinks he's got an easy target, a vulnerable defendant, he might slip up and reveal what he's been doing with falsified evidence and shady testimonies." Regina's eyes hardened. "And Talia, it may get ugly. You'll face real charges on paper. Some of these people won't hesitate to break every ethical rule in the book to see you locked up. We need absolute commitment." Talia glanced from Marcus to Regina. They were both waiting for her to agree, to step into the firing line. She took a measured breath, allowing the weight of this operation to sink in. "Let's do it," she said. Her voice trembled just enough to convey the seriousness of the choice. In that moment, she sealed her fate, forging a path that would lead her to the courtroom in Atlanta, where Mulligan's smirk would greet her like a gauntlet thrown down on the polished floors. A few days after the clandestine meeting, Talia arrived in Atlanta under the guise of visiting a friend, keeping her actual mission concealed. She spent her first day strolling the city, absorbing the local energy, pinpointing the main police precinct, and snapping mental pictures of Mulligan's domain. The plan was simple on the surface. Talia would be caught in possession of a small amount of contraband, planted by a confidential informant working with the DOJ. Officer Mulligan, who was known to keep a close watch on local bars and nightclubs for potential marks, would catch wind of her supposed wrongdoing. He'd arrest her, and from there, the grand performance would begin. That night, Talia visited a well-known lounge called the Blue Orchid, a real establishment in Atlanta, known for its vibrant jazz sessions and cocktails. It was a place that Mulligan frequented when searching for easy arrests, young people who might be too intoxicated to defend themselves properly, or unsuspecting individuals who could be coerced into deals. All around her, neon lights danced on plush chairs while a band played soulful tunes on a small stage. Talia wore a sleek black dress, understated enough not to draw too much attention, but enticing enough to fit the profile Mulligan often preyed on. She sipped her drink slowly at the bar, scanning the room for any sign of him. It didn't take long. Mulligan walked in with two fellow officers, his posture exuding confidence, his eyes sweeping the crowd for potential opportunities. Talia pretended to laugh at a half-hearted conversation with the bartender, casting quick glances in Mulligan's direction, waiting for him to notice her. She didn't have to wait long. His stare landed on her, and a slow grin curled his lips. The trap was set. Before Mulligan could approach, Talia excused herself from the bar and headed toward the ladies' room, as instructed. The DOJ informant had slipped the contraband into her purse earlier in the evening, ensuring Mulligan's search would yield results. Sure enough, as soon as she left the restroom and turned the corner into a dimly lit corridor, Mulligan and his partner were waiting. He took her by the arm. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, voice dripping with a performative politeness. "I got word you might be carrying something illegal tonight. Mind if I take a quick look?" Talia feigned innocence. "What? You must have the wrong person." She clutched her purse defensively, exactly as anyone terrified of a search would. Mulligan's grin spread wider. "We'll see about that," he said. With a well-practiced motion, he and his partner stepped forward and opened her purse. Their flashlights illuminated a small, sealed bag. Talia tensed, performing her role. She let out a gasp of shock and fear as Mulligan held up the bag triumphantly. "Well, well," he murmured. "Drug possession. That's a felony charge. Looks like you're coming downtown with us." His smirk never left his face. Despite knowing this was all planned, Talia felt an icy chill run through her. Even with her DOJ training, the real cuffs pinched as they closed around her wrists. She had to fight back the urge to reveal her hand, to tell Mulligan exactly who he was dealing with. Instead, she bit the inside of her cheek, keeping her head lowered, as Mulligan led her away from the blue orchid amidst the curious stares of onlookers. The day of her arraignment arrived swiftly, culminating in the tense scene in the courthouse hallway where Officer Mulligan and his partner stared her down. Talia could sense Mulligan's confidence expanding with every passing second. To him, this was just another day, another easy suspect who wouldn't be able to afford a decent lawyer, let alone challenge his version of events. Inside the courtroom, Judge Harriet McPherson presided over the day's docket. She was in her late 50s, with curly silver hair and a formidable gaze. Dressed in formal black robes, she radiated an air of authority that left the gallery in respectful silence. Talia's lawyer of record, Josiah Brooks, a local public defender who was secretly briefed on Talia's true role, stood by her side. Mulligan took the stand first, recounting the night in question. His voice was laden with self-importance as he described how he spotted suspicious activity and acted on a tip. Listening, Talia ground her teeth at the casual fabrications inserted for dramatic effect. He made it sound as though Talia was stumbling around, flaunting her alleged contraband. Next, the evidence was presented. The small bag that had been planted in Talia's purse. Judge McPherson narrowed her eyes, scribbling notes. "Miss Morgan," she addressed Talia, "how do you plead to the charge of possession with intent to distribute?" Talia took a breath. Though she yearned to speak the truth, she stuck to the plan. "Not guilty, Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but resolute. McPherson eyed her closely. "I'll set a date for a preliminary hearing in 1 week. In the meantime, Miss Morgan, you will be released on bail, provided you adhere to all conditions." She turned her gaze to Mulligan. "Officer Mulligan, thank you for your testimony. We'll see you back here next week." And with that, the gavel fell, the tension in the room momentarily easing. But Talia felt Mulligan's eyes on her as she filed out of the courtroom. That smirk. There was no mistaking it, or the sense of superiority it conveyed. Talia pressed her lips together, reminding herself that his momentary glee would be short-lived. In the days leading up to the preliminary hearing, Talia juggled her covert work with the constraints of her bail. According to the official record, she was a flight risk, so she had a strict curfew and had to wear an ankle monitor. The device, however, was outfitted by the DOJ to allow her certain freedoms to investigate, so long as she maintained the public appearance of being under house arrest after sundown. During daytime hours, Talia visited attorney appointments that were actually meetings with local contacts from the DOJ. Late one evening, in a dusty back room of a small law library, Talia conferred with Josiah Brooks and a special DOJ analyst named Teresa Nguyen. Teresa was a tech-savvy agent brought in to sift through Mulligan's phone records and financial statements. "There's definitely suspicious activity," Teresa said, pulling up a tablet that displayed complex graphs. "Mulligan's finances show random spikes in deposits that correspond with dismissals of certain cases. A pattern emerges with him arresting individuals who had minor infractions, often minorities, and then those cases magically vanishing once payments funnel through shell accounts." Josiah shook his head in disgust. "He's been collecting bribes in exchange for either losing evidence or falsifying charges. It's a protection racket, and word on the street is that certain local officials may be involved. The question is who?" Talia leaned in, studying the digital trails on Teresa's tablet. The amounts were significant enough to suggest a network beyond one crooked cop. She clenched her fists. We just need to find the right moment to reveal everything in court. But that alone won't be enough if the judge or the prosecution is in on it. Josiah nodded grimly. It has to be airtight. If we move too soon, Mulligan could slip away. If we wait too long, we risk him discovering who you really are. In that claustrophobic law library, illuminated only by the flicker of a few overhead lights, Talia felt the weight of her mission. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who'd been wrongly arrested, coerced, or threatened by Mulligan's network. The line between justice and injustice was razor thin. One wrong move and everything would collapse. 2 nights before the preliminary hearing, Talia got an unexpected phone call. A scratchy, distorted voice addressed her. "Miss Morgan, you don't know me, but I have information about Mulligan and about you. Meet me in the parking lot behind the old sports bar on Peachtree at midnight." Talia's pulse soared. She quickly agreed, though every instinct told her it was a trap. She informed Josiah and Teresa, who insisted that they would provide backup at a distance. Armed with a concealed recorder, Talia slipped away into the humid Atlanta night, the ankle monitor safely overridden by DOJ tech to ensure it wouldn't set off any alarms. Behind the rundown bar on Peachtree Street, the asphalt was riddled with potholes, and a single flickering streetlight cast ominous shadows on the graffiti-stained walls. Talia scanned the area, nerves on edge. She spotted a figure in a hooded jacket stepping out from behind a dumpster. "You came alone?" the figure asked, voice muffled by a mask. "Yes," Talia lied. "What do you have?" The person paused, eyes searching Talia's face. Then, in a rush, the figure blurted, "I worked for Mulligan. He made me plant drugs on people, folks who never did anything wrong. He got orders from higher up." Talia's heart pounded. She inched closer, straining to capture every word on her hidden recorder. Who are these higher-ups? Judges, prosecutors? But before the figure could answer, the squeal of tires cut through the night. A black SUV sped into the lot, headlights flooding the scene. Talia dove behind a rusted trash bin, adrenaline surging. 2 men jumped out, firearms at the ready. The informant let out a terrified shriek, sprinting for cover, but one of the men opened fire. The gunshot echoed in the empty lot. Talia's eyes widened in horror. Her covert training kicked in. She scrambled along the side of the dumpster, searching for an exit route. A bullet ricocheted off the metal beside her, spraying sparks. She pressed her back to the dumpster, heart in her throat. Then, from the darkness, a black sedan roared in. Josiah behind the wheel, Teresa in the passenger seat. Teresa leaned out of the window, brandishing a sidearm. "Get in," she hollered, voice urgent. Talia seized the moment. As more bullets whizzed by, she dashed across the lot and hurled herself into the back seat. The sedan tore away from the scene, tires screeching. Behind them, the SUV and its mysterious occupants vanished into the night. "Who the hell was that?" Josiah gasped, white-knuckling the steering wheel. Talia steadied her breathing, checking the hidden recorder in her jacket. The red light was still on. "They're part of Mulligan's network, obviously," she said between ragged breaths. "They got to our informant before we could, and whoever it was, they wanted to make sure we learned nothing." Teresa's face was grim. "If Mulligan's network has watchers out tonight, they might suspect you're more than a random defendant. We need to move carefully." In the dark interior of the sedan, Talia clutched the recorder, a swirl of guilt and resolve tearing at her. She had promised to protect any whistleblowers who came forward, and she'd failed. Now, the only shred of evidence she had was a frantic confession, half-finished, captured in poor audio. But it was something. And in a case like this, every shred mattered. The day of the preliminary hearing dawned with overcast skies, as if the heavens themselves brooded over the looming confrontation. Talia stood outside the courthouse, her heart heavy with the memory of the informant's fate. She had no idea if the individual survived or was lying injured somewhere. The guilt gnawed at her, yet she also knew her role demanded composure, especially now. The hearing would set the stage for the bigger battles ahead. Inside the courtroom, Mulligan took the stand again. recounting the same fabricated story about Talia's alleged behavior at the Blue Orchid. This time, he added more spice to his testimony, claiming Talia was openly selling illicit substances to bar patrons. Talia forced herself to remain expressionless, though anger roiled within her. When it was Josiah's turn to cross-examine, he rose from the defense table and took measured steps toward Mulligan. "Officer Mulligan," he began, voice smooth. "Could you remind the court how you arrived at the tip that Miss Morgan was distributing narcotics that evening?" Mulligan shrugged nonchalantly. "I got a call from a reliable confidential informant. They said a woman matching Miss Morgan's description was dealing drugs." Josiah's eyebrows rose. "You're certain it was Miss Morgan's description?" "Absolutely," Mulligan said. "I recognized her easily in the club." "Did you see any exchanges of money or goods taking place that night?" "Well," Mulligan faltered slightly. "Not exactly. But the informant has always been reliable. And then we found the drugs on her, so—" Josiah nodded, feigning understanding. Sure. "So you assumed guilt based on an anonymous tip and the presence of contraband in her purse. Did you ever consider that Miss Morgan might have been framed?" Mulligan leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Framed? By whom? Miss Morgan is just a bar hopper. No one would bother framing her. She's nobody." A hush fell over the courtroom. Talia felt the insult keenly, but remained stoic. This was the moment. She glanced at Josiah, who offered her the subtlest nod. They were about to test Mulligan's reaction, reveal a sliver of truth to see how he would respond under pressure. Josiah turned back to Mulligan. "Officer, if you're so confident in this evidence, would you be willing to testify under oath that no one else in your department or beyond has a hand in targeting Miss Morgan?" Mulligan's composure flickered. A flicker of something, unease, passed over his face, but he quickly regained his swagger. "Of course, I swear under oath that no one else is involved. I'm just doing my job." That was when the real drama began. Josiah shot a quick glance at Talia. She rose from her seat, stepping forward. Judge McPherson's eyes darted to the unusual movement. "Miss Morgan, you'll get your chance when your attorney allows it," the judge admonished. "Your Honor," Talia said respectfully, "I have crucial information regarding my defense and the integrity of Officer Mulligan's statements." She paused, letting the tension build. "I also have evidence of a wider network of corruption within the Atlanta Police Department." A ripple of whispers coursed through the courtroom. Even the bailiffs looked unsettled. Mulligan's eyes flicked to Talia, confusion and anger in his gaze. Judge McPherson lifted a hand for silence, her expression stern. "Miss Morgan, that's a serious claim. If this is some kind of tactic—" Talia carefully slid her hand into her blazer pocket and produced her Department of Justice badge. The metal glinted in the courtroom's fluorescent light. Several gasps erupted across the gallery, while Mulligan's jaw dropped. For a moment, a stunned hush filled the entire space. "Your Honor, my name is Talia Morgan," she said, voice steadied by months of training. "I am a special investigator with the United States Department of Justice, operating undercover to investigate systemic corruption and misconduct related to Officer Mulligan's arrests. I have evidence that calls his entire testimony, and many other cases, into question." Pandemonium broke out. People in the gallery leapt to their feet, voices clamoring for clarity. Mulligan's face turned a mottled red, his bravado leaking away like air from a balloon. Judge McPherson slammed her gavel repeatedly. "Order in the court! Order!" she thundered. Once the noise subsided, she pinned Talia with an incredulous stare. "Miss Morgan, Agent Morgan, what is the meaning of this?" Talia raised her chin. "I have been embedded in Atlanta for the past few weeks investigating allegations of planted evidence, bribery, and intimidation by Officer Mulligan. I can present documents and recorded statements that suggest his involvement in multiple wrongful arrests, mine being the most recent." A stunned silence followed. From the corner of her eye, Talia spotted Mulligan's partner, Officer Reyes, inching toward the door. She mentally filed that away. Flight risk. The seeds of doubt and fear were sprouting. Judge McPherson's knuckles were white around the gavel. "I want chambers now. The prosecution, the defense, and Miss Morgan. Court is in recess." And just like that, the facade shattered. The truth was laid bare for the first time, though Talia sensed that the real battle was just beginning. In the judge's private chambers, tensions crackled in the air like static before a storm. The room itself was modestly furnished with dark wood shelves stacked with legal tomes. A single large window looked out on the cityscape, where gray clouds hovered ominously. Judge McPherson sat behind an imposing desk, her usually composed expression taut with shock and annoyance. To her left stood Assistant District Attorney Colleen Harris, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s, clearly shaken by the revelation. On Talia's side of the room, Josiah maintained a calm demeanor. Talia stood beside him, DOJ badge in hand. Mulligan was also present, his earlier arrogance replaced by a simmering rage. At his side was a departmental attorney who looked equally rattled by the sudden turn of events. Judge McPherson folded her hands. "Let's get one thing straight, Agent Morgan. Were you truly arrested under false pretenses, or was this entire ordeal staged by the DOJ?" Talia cleared her throat. "Your Honor, the arrest was real in the sense that Mulligan placed me in custody on fabricated evidence. It was staged from our side only insofar as I allowed myself to be in a situation where he could do so. We had reason to believe he'd do exactly what he did, plant contraband and falsify a tip." Mulligan practically vibrated with indignation. "That's a damn lie. I've never planted anything in my career." His attorney placed a calming hand on his shoulder, cautioning him to keep quiet. Ignoring Mulligan's outburst, Talia handed a folder to Judge McPherson. Inside were copies of financial statements, incomplete audio clips from the near-fatal meeting in the parking lot, and logs of Mulligan's phone messages. "This is preliminary evidence, Your Honor, indicating a pattern of misconduct. There's more we're still compiling." The judge flipped through the pages, her expression darkening. "How dare you disrupt my court this way? I should hold the DOJ in contempt for not informing me of this operation." Talia remained composed. "We had to ensure the integrity of the investigation, Your Honor. We were concerned that leaks within the system might jeopardize the operation." Mulligan's departmental attorney seized the opening. "Leaking to the judge, that's an outrageous implication. Are you suggesting Judge McPherson is compromised?" Talia shook her head. "No, but we have evidence that at least one individual in the local judiciary may be involved. We did not know who, so we had to keep everything confidential." Judge McPherson placed the folder down, massaging her temples. She then fixed Mulligan with a steely gaze. "Officer Mulligan, what do you have to say regarding these allegations?" Mulligan's lawyer stepped forward. "We request an immediate dismissal of charges against Miss Morgan on the grounds of entrapment. Furthermore, we demand a separate hearing to address these allegations of corruption, which are clearly unsubstantiated." Assistant District Attorney Harris finally spoke, her voice trembling with contained anger. "Your Honor, if the DOJ's allegations hold any water, it means that Mulligan's arrest record and potentially other officers' conduct could be compromised. We need a full inquiry." Judge McPherson let out a slow exhale. "This is going to be a legal circus. For now, I'm dismissing the charges against Miss Morgan. I'll schedule a special hearing to examine this evidence. Until then, Officer Mulligan, you are suspended from making further arrests in this matter. Both sides are to present all relevant information within 72 hours. The gavel that Judge McPherson picked up from her desk wasn't slammed, but the tension in her grip was palpable. "Court is adjourned," she said, tone ice-cold. The revelation set off shockwaves throughout the Atlanta community. Local news outlets latched onto the sensational story. Undercover DOJ agent poses as defendant, accuses APD officer of corruption. Talia's face appeared on every major channel, though her identity as an undercover agent sparked both outrage and curiosity. Some believed she was a hero. Others doubted her motives, calling the operation a deceitful entrapment. The city buzzed with speculation. How far did the corruption go? At the DOJ field office in Atlanta, Talia convened with her superiors who had flown in after the story broke wide open. Deputy Attorney General Marcus Whitfield strode into the conference room, lines of fatigue marking his face. "This operation became public sooner than we wanted," he said, "but we can still salvage this. Tell me you have enough evidence to make a solid case." Talia nodded, though her confidence was tempered by the fiasco of the parking lot shooting. "We have documents and partial recordings. We also have a trail of suspicious financial transactions. Teresa Nguyen is analyzing them as we speak. The missing link is live testimony, someone from inside Mulligan's circle who can confirm everything." Regina Pierce, Talia's direct supervisor, folded her arms. "The problem is that your potential informant disappeared. We don't know if they're dead, injured, or simply in hiding." Talia's shoulders slumped. She recalled the fear in that anonymous figure's eyes. "If only we could find them," she murmured. Marcus exhaled deeply. "Without a whistleblower who can name names, we're stuck in a cycle of circumstantial evidence and conspiracy theories. Mulligan might walk away clean, and so might anyone else involved." The conversation stretched on for hours, each minute weighed down by the sense of mounting urgency. By the end, the DOJ's strategy became clear. They would present what they had in the special hearing, hoping it would pressure individuals to talk. Yet Talia couldn't shake the sense that Mulligan had an ace up his sleeve. His network was formidable, and they'd just been publicly challenged. Night descended on Atlanta as Talia returned to her cramped, safe-house apartment on the outskirts of the city. Exhaustion gnawed at her. She kicked off her shoes, letting her feet sink into the worn carpet. The adrenaline that had fueled her for days was draining fast. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it, expecting some update from Teresa. Instead, an unfamiliar number lit up the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A muffled voice responded. "Agent Morgan, I have information for you, if you still want it." Talia's heart thumped. "Who is this?" A pause. "Let's just say I'm close to Mulligan. I've seen what he does, and I was the one who got a call about your meeting behind the bar. I didn't like what went down." A swirl of apprehension and hope gripped Talia. "Where can we meet?" "Not so fast," the caller replied. "You need to promise me full immunity. Mulligan's not the only dirty cop in town. My testimony could get me killed or locked up for a long time. I have a list of judges, lawyers, people on the take." Talia closed her eyes, imagining the scale of corruption. "I'll speak to my superiors, but I can't promise anything until we verify your information. That's how it works." The caller sighed. "Then you'll have to take my word for it. At least for one meeting. Tomorrow. West End Mall, parking garage, top level, noon. Come alone or forget it." The line went dead, leaving Talia with nothing but the low hum of her phone. She stood there for a moment, processing. Had Providence handed them a lifeline? Or was it another trap? The sun was blistering hot the next day as Talia stepped onto the top floor of the West End Mall parking structure. Cars were parked haphazardly in the midday rush, though the upper deck was relatively deserted. She wore casual jeans and a light blouse, trying not to stand out. A small microphone was hidden beneath her collar, and in an SUV several levels below, a DOJ surveillance team monitored every move. Standing near the concrete barrier was a slender figure with dark hair hidden under a baseball cap. As Talia approached, the figure turned slightly, revealing the unmistakable features of Officer Miguel Reyes, Mulligan's partner. Talia froze in disbelief. "You," she breathed, eyes narrowed. "You're the one who called me?" Reyes lifted his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "Keep your voice down. If anyone recognizes us talking, we're both done." Talia scanned the area. Adrenaline surged through her once again. "Why should I trust you? You've been working alongside Mulligan for years." Reyes exhaled, looking genuinely tormented. "I didn't know how deep it went at first. Sure, we booked a few easy arrests, wrote questionable reports, but Mulligan always said it was for the good of the department. Then I realized he was taking bribes, setting people up, blackmailing them. I tried to back out. That's when I got threatened." Talia studied his face, searching for deception. Threatened how? Mulligan told me if I ratted him out, he'd pin everything on me. Said he had judges in his pocket. I'd be the scapegoat. Or worse, I'd end up in a ditch. I want out, but I need protection. Talia's mind raced. Reyes was exactly the inside witness they needed. Someone who could tie Mulligan's actions directly to bigger fish. But he was also a dirty cop, complicit in numerous crimes. The moral quandary was stark. She needed him, but could she trust him? If you testify, Talia said carefully, we can offer some form of deal. I won't lie to you. It won't be a free pass. But if your testimony is solid, you'll be safer with us than on your own. Reyes nodded, grim resignation in his eyes. I have files, copies of Mulligan's logs, emails that reference payouts, even a few recordings of phone calls with a local judge named Rollins. It's all on a flash drive, hidden at a friend's place. I can get them for you tonight. Talia felt a surge of cautious optimism. Judge Rollins was a name that had circulated in hushed whispers, rumored to be crooked. All right, bring that drive to the DOJ field office. We'll keep you safe. A screech of tires made them both jump. A car whipped around the corner onto the top deck, tinted windows concealing whoever was inside. Talia cursed under her breath. We need to move. But it was too late. Gunfire erupted from the car's open passenger window. Talia dove behind a nearby vehicle, yanking Reyes down with her. Bullets pinged off the concrete, and the sound echoed through the structure. Down below, the DOJ surveillance team would be scrambling to reach them. Talia pressed her phone's emergency button. Agent down! Parking top floor! Shots fired! She shouted, hoping the microphone picked up every word. Reyes, breathing heavily, peered over the car hood. That's Mulligan's style, but I can't be sure it's him. We gotta get out of here. The car sped closer, engine revving. Talia and Reyes sprinted between rows of parked cars, the adrenaline fueling their every step. Suddenly, the DOJ SUV emerged on the ramp, agents pouring out with guns drawn. The attackers screeched to a halt, reversed, and sped down the ramp. Talia caught a brief glimpse of the license plate. No time to memorize it fully, but maybe enough to help an investigation. Finally, silence settled over the parking deck. Talia and Reyes slumped against a pillar, hearts pounding. The DOJ agents rushed over, forming a protective circle. It was a near miss, but a powerful reminder that Mulligan's network was prepared to use lethal force to silence anyone threatening their operation. Safe behind the fortified walls of the DOJ field office later that evening, Reyes handed over a small flash drive to Talia. This is everything I've got, he said, voice trembling with residual fear. Talia, along with Teresa, Regina, and Marcus, immediately loaded the drive onto a secure computer. The contents were explosive. Wire transfers from Mulligan to offshore accounts, audio clips in which Mulligan and Judge Rollins discussed arrangements for favorable rulings, plus correspondences linking Mulligan to a city council member with known ties to organized crime. The scale of corruption was staggering. This is a gold mine, Regina whispered, her usual composure shattered. Judge Rollins is powerful in this district. If he's in on this, who else? Marcus laid a hand on Talia's shoulder. You did good, Agent Morgan. Now we have enough to demand an emergency hearing. We can bring Mulligan and Rollins down, maybe more. News of the attempted shooting in the parking garage also spread like wildfire. Public sentiment, already stirred by Talia's revelation in court, now shifted heavily in favor of the DOJ's investigation. The media painted Mulligan as a rogue officer, and speculation about Judge Rollins's involvement grew. A special evidentiary hearing was fast-tracked, convened under the jurisdiction of a federal judge from outside the Atlanta circuit, Judge Sarah Kendrick, known for her no-nonsense style. The courthouse was swarmed with journalists, activists, and curious onlookers. Security was tight, with federal marshals manning every exit. Talia felt the weight of countless eyes on her as she stepped into the polished wood-paneled courtroom. On the prosecution side sat Assistant District Attorney Colleen Harris, now fully aligned with the DOJ's findings. Mulligan was flanked by 3 attorneys, and Judge Rollins, looking pale and stern, sat a few rows behind them, presumably as an observer. Everyone in the room knew that his name was about to be dragged through the mud, yet he still projected an aura of authority, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Judge Kendrick wasted no time. "We are here to determine the merits of corruption charges brought against Officer Brad Mulligan and any co-conspirators. Agent Talia Morgan, you may proceed with your presentation of evidence." Talia took the stand, steadying her nerves. She recounted her undercover operation, the arrest, and the series of events that led to collecting the flash drive. She played audio clips of Mulligan's phone calls, letting the court hear his voice discussing payoffs. The room collectively tensed at the mention of Judge Rollins in those calls. Then Talia introduced Reyes as a witness. Reyes stood, voice quavering but resolute. He detailed how Mulligan coerced him into planting evidence, forging reports and tampering with witness statements. Each revelation chipped away at Mulligan's veneer of innocence. Mulligan's lawyers attempted to discredit Reyes, painting him as a cowardly opportunist. But Reyes held firm, tears brimming in his eyes as he confessed his own guilt. "I'm not proud of what I did," he said, voice cracking. "I'm sorry for everyone we hurt, but Officer Mulligan is the one who orchestrated it all, and we had help from the bench." That was the moment Judge Kendrick's gaze locked onto Judge Rollins. "Judge Rollins," she said, "please approach the stand." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Rollins had no choice. He walked to the front, posture rigid. Mulligan stared at him with an expression close to panic. If Rollins flipped on him, Mulligan was finished. Under questioning, Rollins feigned ignorance, claiming that any conversation he had with Mulligan was about legitimate judicial affairs. Talia and Teresa then presented records of bank transfers from Mulligan's shell companies to accounts linked to Rollins's family trust. The color drained from Rollins's face. Slowly but inexorably, the entire story unfolded. Mulligan would arrest individuals, often minorities or vulnerable people who couldn't afford top legal defense. With help from certain individuals in the district attorney's office, these defendants would be pressured into plea deals. If they paid large sums, the charges might vanish. If not, they'd face harsh sentences courtesy of Rollins or other compromised judges. As the final piece of evidence, Talia played a damning phone recording. Mulligan and Rollins discussing a higher-than-normal fee for dropping a case against a local businessman's son. The hush that followed was deafening. Rollins's eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline. Mulligan's face was a storm of hatred, directed at Talia, Reyes, and anyone else who dared to speak out. Judge Kendrick's voice sliced through the tension. "Based on the evidence presented, there is more than sufficient cause to bring formal corruption and conspiracy charges against Officer Mulligan and Judge Rollins. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate review of all cases overseen by Judge Rollins in the last 10 years, as well as any in which Officer Mulligan played a part." She turned her sharp gaze toward Mulligan's team of lawyers. "I suggest you start advising your client to cooperate." A throng of journalists pressed forward, cameras flashing as Mulligan was taken into custody right there in the courtroom. Rollins, once a pillar of authority, was also detained. Talia watched the scene, a tumult of relief, shock, and lingering anger churning within her. The task was far from over. There would be months, if not years, of legal battles, investigations into other officials, and justice for countless victims. But at least the first domino had fallen. Karma rarely knocks loudly. Sometimes it moves like a shadow, silent, deliberate, and final. But for Officer Brad Mulligan, karma didn't just knock. It blew the door clean off its hinges. The courtroom was still echoing with the fallout from the special hearing. The audio recordings, the financial trails, the testimony from Reyes. Every revelation had cracked the mask Mulligan wore for years. His once slick persona of a decorated, respected officer had withered in real time, like a portrait left out in the rain. And as federal marshals clamped the cold cuffs around his wrists, the smirk he'd worn so proudly, the same one he gave Talia the night he arrested her, vanished without a trace. He looked lost, not defiant, not even angry, just hollow. As he was led out of the courthouse through the back entrance, away from the media circus on the front steps, Mulligan passed by a hallway mirror he'd likely strode past many times before. But this time the reflection didn't match the man he used to be. His uniform stripped of honor, his hands shaking, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. There were no reporters there, no camera flashes, just the truth staring back at him. He had once built his world on lies, rigged arrests, planted evidence, coerced confessions, but every lie was a brick, and he had built himself a prison, one deception at a time. And now, he was locked inside it. The charges came like a torrent: felony corruption, perjury, evidence tampering, abuse of authority, conspiracy to commit judicial fraud, and attempted murder in connection with the ambush at the West End Mall. Federal investigators linked him to over 77 tainted arrests and 24 plea deals pressured under threat or blackmail. Some of his victims had spent years behind bars. Others had lost jobs, families, and futures. One name stood out: Lamar Easton, a straight-A college student whose life was upended after a planted cocaine charge. He never graduated. Took his own life 2 years into a sentence he never should have served. When his mother heard Mulligan was finally arrested, she showed up to the courthouse. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply stood in the corridor outside the courtroom with Lamar's graduation photo clutched to her chest, whispering, "You don't get to smirk now." The image of her face, silent, strong, broken, stayed with every officer and official who passed her. But karma wasn't done, because behind Mulligan stood a larger beast, the system that enabled him. Judge Leonard Rollins, who had once slammed his gavel with the force of God, now found himself in front of it. Federal agents raided his home at dawn, an elegant Victorian in Buckhead. He emerged in silk pajamas, face pale, escorted into the blinding blue and red swirl of police lights. The neighborhood watched from windows. He didn't speak, didn't shout about innocence. He simply hung his head. Documents found in his study detailed years of payoffs through fake legal retainers and expedited court fees, offshore accounts in Belize, phone logs connecting him to defense attorneys who routinely lost evidence. He had betrayed the very bench he swore to uphold. The Department of Justice, with Talia's meticulous groundwork and Teresa Nguyen's data tracing, brought down 5 more individuals tied to the web: 2 prosecutors, a city councilman, and even a clerk who had been quietly altering court records for a price. Atlanta was rattled. The city's faith in its institutions, cracked for years, now sat in rubble. Yet somehow people weren't just angry, they were awakening. Families who had once been too afraid to speak came forward. Community leaders, once discouraged by the silence of justice, now stood in front of microphones. News vans lined the streets like streetlights, and the conversation shifted from fear to reckoning. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a full-page front-cover headline: "Unmasked, Justice Finally Served." Under it was a photo of Talia walking out of the courthouse, not in cuffs this time, but in full DOJ attire, badge visible, head held high. Back inside federal holding, Mulligan waited for trial. His cell was small, sterile, and unchanging. The buzz of fluorescent lights above him offered no comfort, no sirens to hide behind, no smirks, no power. There were rumors he might flip, give names, cut deals. But the DOJ had learned one thing: bullies don't bend under pressure. They break. He broke in silence. The footage of his interrogation would later be used in training seminars on corruption. A once proud officer slowly unraveling under the weight of his own deceit. His sentencing was swift and merciless. Life in prison, no parole, not for the drugs, not even for the bribes, but for the pattern of destruction he left in his wake, and the lives shattered in his rise to power. He appealed. Of course he did. But each request was denied with a single line: "Justice has been served." For Reyes, the former partner turned whistleblower, redemption didn't come free. He was sentenced to 10 years, with possibility of early parole under witness protection. His testimony, while invaluable, didn't erase what he'd done. He accepted the verdict with tears in his eyes and a letter in his pocket, handwritten by Talia, thanking him for finally stepping out of the shadows. And for Judge Rollins, he took a plea deal. Disbarred, disgraced, and facing 25 years in federal prison, he would spend the rest of his days in a cell smaller than his former chambers. Ironically, just down the hall from people he once sentenced with disdain. A cruel, poetic twist of fate. But karma didn't just bring down the corrupt, it lifted up the brave. Talia Morgan became a name whispered in classrooms, police academies, and law schools across the country. The agent who played Defendant, the woman who flipped the courtroom, the undercover force who walked into a trap and walked out with the whole system in her hand. She was awarded the Presidential Medal of Valor for law enforcement the following year. She didn't want the ceremony, but she attended for one reason. Lamar Easton's mother, who was seated in the front row holding her son's photo. As Talia stood at the podium, she said, "This isn't about me. This is about the ones who didn't get to walk out of courtrooms, the ones silenced, forgotten. This medal belongs to them." The room rose in applause, and so did a nation. Weeks turned to months, trials were prepared, and Talia testified in several of them. Each time she took the stand, she felt a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride that justice was finally within reach, sorrow for the countless lives ruined by Mulligan and his ilk. She remembered the families of those wrongly convicted, the tears of mothers who lost their children to a flawed system. At least now, the tide was turning. One evening, Talia received an email from an address she didn't recognize. When she opened it, she found a single line. "Thank you for trying to help me behind the Blue Orchid. I'm safe now. Keep fighting." It was unsigned, but she knew exactly who it was. The first anonymous informant, the person who risked everything to blow the whistle before being attacked. They had survived, a small triumph in this chaotic chapter. At the DOJ's recommendation, Talia was offered a promotion, the chance to lead a new task force aimed at rooting out corruption in law enforcement agencies across the nation. She accepted. Her mission had become more than just a job. It was a calling, one she intended to pursue with unwavering dedication. On the day she left Atlanta, Talia stood once more on the steps of the Fulton County Courthouse. The same building that had nearly swallowed her whole as a defendant now stood behind her, the symbol of a justice system that could be bent but not entirely broken. She raised her chin, letting the warm Georgia breeze carry away the weight of her undercover persona. She was ready for the next battle, wherever it might be. And somewhere in a high-security cell, Officer Mulligan sat alone, his arrogance replaced by desperation. The walls he once wielded to imprison others now closed in on him. He had no allies left, only the hollow echo of his own regrets, reminding him every day that karma had finally come. And so ends the turbulent saga of Talia Morgan, an undercover DOJ agent who boldly stepped into a defendant's shoes to expose one of Atlanta's dirtiest secrets. From the moment Officer Mulligan's smirk met Talia's determined stare in the courthouse, every power play and betrayal led to an explosive unveiling of corruption. Now Mulligan faces charges he once doled out so carelessly, and the judicial system, rocked to its core, has a chance to rebuild. Talia's triumph is more than personal victory. It is a beacon of hope that even in the darkest corridors of power, justice can find a way. If this story gripped your heart and kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Join us for more stories that celebrate the pursuit of truth and the incredible people who risk everything to see justice served. Your support helps us shine a light where others would keep us in the dark. Thank you for watching.